All right. Hello, world. This is CS50 at the beautiful Harvard University Stadium. My name is David Malan, and I teach CS50, which, if unfamiliar, is Harvard University's introduction to the intellectual enterprises of computer science and the art of programming. Over the past few weeks, we've started doing some of these live questions and answer sessions, otherwise known here on campus as office hours, which is an opportunity to ask questions online for me and the team to answer here at Harvard. We thought it'd be fun to take office hours on the road today. We don't normally hold office hours in the football stadium or American football stadium, but today we thought we'd give you a glimpse of other parts of campus. Now, I myself don't know all that much about the history of the stadium, but I am really good at Wikipedia, so I pulled up a few sentences for us. The Harvard Stadium is a U-shaped college football stadium in the Northeast United States, located in the Allston neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. The stadium is owned and operated by Harvard University and is home to the Harvard Crimson football program. The stadium's seating capacity is 30,323. So not all that large relative to professional stadiums, but certainly as universities go, it's a lot of seats. And how about some history? Well, a few more tidbits. Built in 1903, it was a pioneering execution of reinforced concrete in the construction of large structures. Because of its early importance in these areas and its influence on the design of later stadiums, it was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1987. The stadium is the nation's oldest permanent concrete structure dedicated to intercollegiate athletics, and today, Computer Science 50 office hours. Let's take a look.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Harvard Stadium. One of our first questions here is how to start thinking like a coder. How could you think like a programmer? Well, here we like to say computer science is about breaking problems into smaller pieces and tackling them one step at a time, or thinking algorithmically. Now let's come down and continue our Q&A. Hey, David.
Oh, hi, Carter.
Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you, too.
Go ahead.
For those unfamiliar, Carter is CS50's preceptor, which means he helps run CS50 the class, and also is now teaching a course of his own that's about to debut on edX and other platforms in October called
CS50 SQL, Introduction to Databases.
Nice. Well, I think we have a whole bunch of questions coming in. Feel free to chime in, and also feel free to say hello to the world and where you are in the world. What do we have in store today?
One of our first questions here is, should we go for CS50W after taking CS50X?
So CS50W is CS50's introduction to web programming with Python and JavaScript. It's taught by CS50's own Brian Yu. After taking CS50X, if you find yourself enjoying the last few weeks of the class especially, and perhaps your final project, if you do something web-based, then yes, that's exactly why CS50W exists, to pick up where CS50 leaves off and sort of take you further into the world of web programming, so that after CS50X and CS50W, you're pretty well prepared to develop your own web applications, be it in those languages or perhaps even others, since the ideas are going to be very similar.
Nice. Now, continuing with follow-on courses from CS50 itself, question about cybersecurity, the new course that you just made. How difficult are the assignments going to be compared to CS50X?
That's a very good question, Carter. And why don't you ask us that in October when all of the assignments exist? We spent the past few weeks over the summer actually filming the new content. Next up are the actual assignments, and I think that you will find them to be just challenging enough.
Nice. Now, transitioning a bit here to a question about ChatGPT and AI, what are your thoughts on using ChatGPT to help with coding for your problem sets?
So, a good question. And we've begun experimenting this summer at Harvard Summer School, and this fall we'll be addressing this, and also for CS50X and all of CS50's online classes. The short of it is that CS50's current thinking, and my own personally, professionally, is that use of ChatGPT and similar AI-based tools will simply be disallowed by CS50's policy. But the goal is to nonetheless embrace these technologies, but embrace them in what we hope is going to be a more educationally supportive way. So by that I mean CS50 is in the process of developing this summer and beta testing with some of our summer students a whole bunch of tools that are built into VS Code and that are also publicly available on the web that use software like ChatGPT, but don't just hand you the answer to coding questions, but rather tries to guide you to the solution, just like a good teacher, a good teaching assistant, a good friend might, as opposed to just handing you the answer. So tools like ChatGPT specifically won't be allowed yet moving forward. They're simply too helpful out of the box, but you will be welcome and encouraged to use CS50's own tool, which will be very similar in spirit, but not quite as, by design, spoiling of the answers.
Nice. And if AI is getting increasingly helpful, we have a question here. Do you think it will take over some of our tech jobs, perhaps now or perhaps in the future?
That's a good question. So it's tough to say, but I think the short answer is yes. Certain things that you and I as humans find tedious right now, and I can think of a whole bunch of technical things that I particularly don't enjoy doing, even though I know how to do them and am perhaps good at doing them. I would be thrilled if software takes over some of those responsibilities. And by this, I mean, in my case, things like certain GUI aspects, like when you're designing some web application or just kind of laying things out. And keep in mind that this has been like a process happening for over some time. Like back in the day, back in my day when we learned HTML, like we wrote HTML from scratch when it was HTML 1.0. But then came along tools like Dreamweaver, software that you can install on your Mac or PC, and click, 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 it generates HTML for you. But it didn't always generate like the exact HTML you wanted, so invariably you had to still know HTML and later CSS to make modifications. Nowadays, of course, there's sites in the US at least like Squarespace and Wix and others that build sites for you. But even then, if you want to customize them, you have to drop down one level of abstraction and actually know a bit about HTML and CSS. So I honestly think we're going to see a similar trend with AI, which is going to be more powerful than tools like that, but it's going to relieve us of some of the tedium of just doing the less interesting stuff and really free you and me to implement more features, fix more bugs, and actually produce more interesting, compelling applications just by ourselves, even using our sort of virtual co-pilot or AI assistant.
And let's say someone wants to learn about AI. Do you have any recommendations for courses?
Oh, well, I think we do. So our same Brian Yu teaches a class that's an introduction to AI, or artificial intelligence, with Python. So this is a class, too, that does assume that you know how to program a bit already, as by taking CS50X, in which we teach a little bit of Python along the way. So that's a great class to take, Brian's CS50 AI, if you'd like to learn not just about some of the ideas in artificial intelligence, but like how to translate it to actual code. So not just theory, but practice as well.
And let's say someone wants to attend the classes, maybe for CS50X this upcoming fall. How could they do that?
Indeed. We'll soon be making details available about how, if you happen to be in Cambridge, Massachusetts, if you happen to be in Boston, Massachusetts, or within driving or visiting distance, we'll circulate a form online via which you can sign up to actually attend and be on campus in person. Would you like to flip the iPad over to me and I can try to ask some questions your way as well?
Maybe microwave or two.
Okay, so here we go. Let me scroll through all of the juicy questions that have been coming in here. So let's see.
There's some of the chat too.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So Carter, are there companies that accept students to work online in order to gain experience, would you say?
It's a good question. I'm sure there are some that are out there, and often just putting yourself out there, sending that email, asking that question could get you into that kind of role. There are often sites for this kind of thing. Maybe I could ask you if you know any off the top of your head. But there are places you can go to learn out where you can try to practice coding by working on some other person's project, which actually help you learn a lot about programming by looking at somebody else's code.
Sorry about that. We only have one microphone today, and clearly I forgot to share.
All right.
So this is a question that admittedly is maybe something that I could answer historically, but you've been with CS50's team so long that we have a question as follows. Why the initial weeks of CS50X is taught in C instead of a more advanced OOP language like C++ or Java?
Yeah, I think we get that question quite a lot in CS50. Why do we start with C? Well, part of it is just pedagogical motivation. We talked earlier about thinking like a programmer. How do you do that? Well, you take a problem, you break it down into smaller pieces, and you have to understand how a computer actually works. Now, C does a good job at actually showing you how that stuff works by showing you memory and pointers and so on very early on. So you appreciate later just how much Python and other languages can give you in the end. Let me have you add on to that if you'd like.
Yeah, no, that's very much the case. And I think in your own question, you kind of answered it for us. The fact that you ask about more advanced object-oriented programming techniques. I mean, CS50 is not meant to be an advanced class, even though it's absolutely a challenge and rigorous in terms of its workload and expectations. But C is just a simpler, smaller language than C++, and it allows us to explore ideas of control flow, loops, conditionals, and so forth. And OOP, object-oriented programming, is really a solution to a problem that you only appreciate once you've done things without OOP. And once your code and projects have gotten large enough that you realize that there's got to be a better way. And indeed, an answer to that question is object-oriented programming. So I think narratively, educationally, it sort of should come later, not right from the beginning. So Carter, let's see, a couple other questions that have come in here. How do you start thinking like a coder? What's the first question we should ask ourselves?
The first question you should ask yourselves when you're thinking like a coder. One thing I like to ask myself when I'm looking at some new code, for instance, is just like, how does it work? And when I try to approach some new line of code, I'll start by going kind of line by line, thinking through this first line, that second line, in my head, kind of tracing it back and forth. Maybe I'll take out some paper, write things down, try to visualize it on actual pencil and paper here. I find it's helpful to actually draw things out and not just look at code all the time.
Carter, another question that I'm sure is for you and not me at this point, but dude, how long will you be looking this young?
Oh, me? Well, hopefully in the next 50 years, but we'll see.
Okay. Thank you, though, if that was actually intended for me. So let's see. What else do we have coming into the chat here? Let's see. When is the cybersecurity course coming, Carter?
When is cybersecurity coming? Well, that is a great question. It'll be released publicly on edX and via our OpenCourseWare website on October 1st. So mark your calendars, October 1st.
And maybe this is a question for me, so I'll tee this up and then hand things over to you. So, hey, David and Carter, so maybe for you too. My question is, well, no, here we go, back to me. How did David improve himself on giving perfect presentations as he does? Thank you. Any suggestions as to how to become more articulate? So honestly, I think a lot of it is actually just practice, right? Like I have been, to our discussion of age a moment ago, I've been teaching CS50 for 16 years now, and that's a lot of practice, teaching some of the same material, different demographics of students, different venues, and just getting a sense of what works well and what doesn't. So what you're seeing in each year is hopefully only what worked well the previous year, and maybe new ideas that will work or might not work well that we just thought of along the way. But also I think what I've come to do is observe other people a lot, and I dare say even when I was in college or high school or prior, like I took a lot of bad classes, I had a lot of bad teachers, and I took mental note of what it was I did not like about what they were doing, and quite literally I've tried to do the opposite, like do not do that thing. And then conversely, when I've encountered someone who I think is an amazing speaker, whether it's in a class, maybe it's on YouTube, or just in person in general, like I try to make mental note of what it is they did well and what it was that persuaded me so. And in fact, growing up, if I think back, one of my earliest interests was actually studying history and American history, and I was fascinated by American orators of yesteryear and Daniel Webster and people from early America, in large part because of the persuasive abilities that apparently historically they had in just convincing people of ideas and of missions and so forth. So I found that very inspiring along the way. But I think the easiest answer, honestly, is just practice and finding ways to practice public speaking.
Continuing on asking about your teaching, I'm curious if, you can do a lot of things with a computer science degree. So what made you want to start teaching in the end? Was it these orators that you talked about, learning about earlier, or something else?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is all kind of by accident. I don't think I grew up thinking that I want to be a teacher when I grow up. I did find that, funny enough, in college, I ran for student government president, essentially. So the kids who sort of legislate things as related to students and sort of try to solve problems and make campus life better and so forth. And I lost miserably running for this particular role. And one of the takeaways I had at the time was just how bad I was in the debate. So I and a bunch of other kids who were running for this position had some kind of debate about issues and ideas and so forth. And I felt like I just really didn't perform very well. And so literally that next semester, maybe next year, I signed up, a little ironically, to be a teacher, in large part because I wanted to improve my public speaking. And so I joined the Harvard Computer Society, which is one of the extracurricular student groups on campus, and volunteered to teach some of their seminars. So back in the day, this was like HTML 1.0, and just teaching classmates of mine how to make their very first websites. And from that, it led to an opportunity to be a teaching fellow, or TF, for Harvard's Extension School, which is the continuing ed program, largely for adults in the Cambridge area and nowadays online. And I had this amazing opportunity to be a teaching fellow, so helping out the professor in the fall semester of my senior year of college. And then, crazy enough, that professor wasn't able to continue teaching in the spring, and so they really needed someone last minute to fill in, and I somehow talked my way into being the instructor for the course, even when I was like still a student in college. And then that's where I sort of got an appetite for teaching, and I found that I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the theatricality of it. And I found, too, that along the way, if I didn't pursue higher education, for instance, a master's degree or a PhD, at least here in the U.S., a lot of doors educationally were going to be closed to me. And so that's why I came back a few years later, started my PhD for 5 years, and then it was right place, right time. And that was 16 years ago. But I never really intended to be doing this full time. It just kind of happened, in large part because I was a bad public speaker. So,
All right. So if you have watched these lectures, you've seen our props that we use in lecture, like these, our duck most recently. We have all kinds of props as well. Question from Katya is, what are the real-world applications of algorithms and data structures, and how might those show up in the props we use?
How might they show up in the props we use? So a lot of the theatricality, so to speak, of week 3, which is on algorithms in CS50, is about searching and sorting. And honestly, like those topics in particular are everywhere in the world. And odds are, maybe even during this live stream, you've searched for something on your computer, on your phone, pulling up Google or Bing or the like. Like that's all algorithms. That's all data structures underneath the hood, making it really fast for you to find information. Nowadays with AI, ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot and similar, like that's all algorithms. And it's more sophisticated certainly than just binary search or linear search or the like. It's much more sophisticated algorithms, such as you would learn in Brian's CS50 AI class, but those two are all about algorithms. And so I think a lot of the physical props we use in class are really designed just to make very abstract ideas, very software-centric ideas, just come to life and give you, ideally, like this memory of that you can latch onto, and so that even if it feels like you learned so much information or should have learned so much information this past week, you at least have this visual where you can think, okay, binary search, okay, that was the one with the doors, or linear search, okay, that was the one when walking left to right, or bubble sort, that was like swapping the numbers back and forth, and just giving you these memorable moments, so to speak, to latch onto that indeed help the material sink in.
Nice. And thinking of physical props and so on, somebody asked about the Internet of Things, or IoT. How could somebody learn about that with CS50?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like the world doesn't really talk about IoT as much anymore. It's just kind of becoming commonplace that we have devices all over our lives. So IoT devices, or Internet of Things, just means like devices that aren't obviously laptops or desktops or phones. It's things like your refrigerator that actually have a computer in them, or your car, which has some kind of computer in it, or any device at home that has some kind of electronic circuitry and logic built into it. That's the Internet of Things, and really anything that's connected to your Wi-Fi nowadays is an Internet of Things device. So we don't teach about IoT devices per se in CS50, but I don't think you really have to, because they're just computers. They're miniature computers. They might be running specialized languages, and maybe frankly even something like C, which tends to perform very well in devices that only have a little bit of power or a little bit of battery life, and therefore you want to be as conservative as possible with how much code you're writing and executing. But there's no reason that after CS50 you can't go find a Raspberry Pi or some other small device that's representative of an IoT device and program it using C, Python, or most anything else. Do you want to swap roles again here, and I'll
Let's
find
do
us
it.
some juicy questions?
All right.
And I'll ask one too while I start to scroll. How did you find your way to CS50 in Harvard?
A bit of a long story. So for a while,
Okay.
let me just talk for the next
We'll be
5 minutes
back.
here. Yeah. No, I thought for a while I was going to be a high school teacher. I wanted to teach computer science because my own experience wasn't that great. I would learn how to type in a word processor, but wouldn't really learn how to program computers and make them do all I wanted them to do. So I didn't want to be a teacher in that way. But I didn't know I would actually teach at CS50, and so I went to my graduate school of education degree here at Harvard and found the team through that, decided to join and see what I could do to help out.
Oh, so that wasn't that long.
Not too long.
But your experience, interestingly enough, was during COVID, and so you actually, ironically, didn't come to campus until really you started working with CS50.
Yeah, that's correct. So my entire degree program here at Harvard was all online, much like yours might be if you take our classes online. Was a good experience in the end because I got to meet folks and take the classes I wanted to take and also learn what I wanted to learn.
Is there a course, Carter, in edX about C# or Django?
Is there a course on edX about C# or Django? Two kind of different frameworks and languages.
Problems, I dare say.
Yep, so there is one on Django, CFG's own web programming, instructional web programming there. You can find that online. CFGW, C#, I'm not so sure about. Do you know about that one?
Probably. There's so many courses on edX now, honestly. If you just go to edX.org and search for both of those keywords, it should turn up solutions. CS50 doesn't have anything on C#. Django is used in Brian's web class, but beyond that, we would refer you to the website itself, I think.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, let me go ahead here and scroll through here. Carter, would you say that CS50X would help a career in data science?
It would help a career in data science. I think it absolutely would, in part because you learn about how computers work at a fundamental level. So if you're going off and being a data scientist, you're going to work certainly with lots of data, but you're going to want to learn about algorithms to process that data, understand how data is actually represented on the computer, and CFTX can help you with all those kinds of questions at a fundamental level as well.
And this is a variant of an earlier question, but I'm curious to hear your take too. So Willie asks, albeit for me, but I'm going to kick it to Carter. You said AI can take up some programming jobs. Should I be discouraged to start learning how to program?
I think probably, in fact, the opposite. It's like such an amazing time right now to get into computer science because AI can help you learn and also help you as you build tools you want to build. As David said earlier, I think it's really a tool to help us fix things, solve new problems. So it hasn't been really a more exciting time to get into it than now, I would say.
Nice. Let's see, Carter. A few other questions here. Is, a little broad, but is college enough to start a programming career?
Is college enough to start a programming career? I think it certainly is. It's helpful if you take some computer science classes along the way. I do know folks who didn't go to college and have a wonderful programming career now. I know folks who didn't do any computer science in college and now have a wonderful computer science career right now as well. So it's up to your own path and the way you want to learn. And the reason we put these courses online sometimes is to help you find your own path towards that career or your own projects you want to build in the end.
And here's one of these religious debates. One of our participants here asks, what's your favorite coding language? And if you'd like, feel free to chime in now into the chat with your favorite languages, and we'll see who agrees and disagrees.
I'm curious what answers we'll get in the end here. One that has actually started to stick with me now is C, just because of its basic nature. Like you can kind of learn the entire language in ways you can't learn other ones. So I've really enjoyed that part of C. I also work a lot with Python, just by nature of building scripts to help manage the course, and that's been helpful.
Agrees with you.
Oh, thanks, Andreas. I appreciate that.
Nice.
And let me maybe ask you a few questions if you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Flip things over.
Let's see. I have one here. I can take the... No, you can take it.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Next week we'll have two mics. Stay tuned for two mics next week.
So I have a question from a beginner in computer science. They're asking, what should be their roadmap and strategy to become an expert in the field? They've never studied computer science before.
I mean, I think it depends on where you want to go with it. Generally speaking, among our own CS50 students at Harvard who want to do software engineering, for instance, and work in the tech industry, like we encourage students to take at least 2 classes. So CS50 is very often the first class that they take, and then we encourage them to take some other class, particularly in software. So this might be a class on object-oriented programming, one of the topics that came up earlier, or it might be a class on functional programming, which is a different paradigm, a different way of writing code as well. And I say that because I think it helps round you out as a programmer, and you won't necessarily approach a job, you won't necessarily approach opportunities thinking, oh, gee, I only know C or I only know Python, but rather, no, you know how to program. And in CS50, you tend to learn how to program procedurally or imperatively, which is a paradigm of programming that's similar to any of the if conditionals and the loops and the variables and the state that you're already familiar with if you've taken some or all of CS50. But if you've been acquainted with classes and methods and ideas like that, then that's an opportunity to weave object-oriented primitives into your muscle memory and the toolkit that you can bring to bear on problems in the real world. Functional programming, like actually treating functions as objects, so that's kind of a nice narrative continuation of a discussion of object-oriented programming. That's a characteristic of functional programming that just gives you another tool in your toolkit for actually solving problems in the real world. So I think if you're interested in moving into industry, you should minimally have taken like 2 programming software classes, and then beyond that, you start to go more deeply into theory, like data structures themselves and algorithms. Maybe you would learn a little something about hardware or graphics or AI, certainly nowadays, so you can go deeper and deeper. But what I don't think you necessarily need to do is wait until finishing an entire program in CS before pursuing a job or an apprenticeship or a part-time opportunity. Usually 2 classes should at least get you going.
Nice. And thinking of roadmaps and pathways here, we have a question from somebody who's taking the course online. Mm-hmm. They're asking, is it okay to skip some problem sets if they feel like they want to or just aren't quite interested in them?
Well, of course, if you're taking the class online via edX or YouTube or the like, you should certainly feel free to do whatever it is you want to do when approaching the material so that you get out of it what you actually want. If, though, you want to have what we do feel is a complete experience that sort of starts at 0 and takes you to 100% knowledge that we hope that you'll get out of the class, then I do think you should do your best to at least try to stick with the course's curriculum and probably not skip too much or jump around, because odds are that we'll just leave you with conceptual holes, practical holes in your knowledge, and you're just going to make your life harder for subsequent problem sets. I would encourage you, therefore, to try to seek out help online, family or friends or the like, or nowadays CS50's Duck for AI, to try to get over that hurdle. But if you want to kind of explore, or you decide that, I don't really want to be a programmer, I don't really want to finish the course per se, but I do want to learn a little something about web programming, or learn a little something about cybersecurity, then yes, jump around. But I wouldn't jump around just because you're finding something hard, because you're only going to make subsequent material potentially harder.
We have time for just a few more questions here. One from a middle school teacher who's currently starting an MA in educational technologies. What kinds of areas would you recommend for MA study and hopefully for PhD?
Can you read the question once more for the beginning?
Yeah, so they're a middle school teacher, and they're currently starting an MA in educational technologies. They're asking what areas you would recommend for MA study or master's study and maybe a PhD.
Oh, interesting. In educational studies, frankly, this is a better question for Carter, because he actually went to school in education, whereas I went to school in computer science. I suspect the technical answer to that question is some of the basics. So like certainly having some exposure to programming in some number of languages, having some greater depth in data structures and algorithms, which are sort of core to computing and educational technologies more generally. I would probably learn a bit of practical knowledge when it comes to things like networking and the internet itself and how it actually works, because that will give you a better mental model of how educational technologies intercommunicate and can actually be used to solve problems. Beyond that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Carter, because he actually studied this in school.
I would certainly agree, and one thing I found the most interesting was the pedagogy of how you teach computer science well. My advisor, Karen Brennan, who's also here at Harvard, she focuses a lot on how you teach computer science to help folks be creative with it, how they can build awesome things with computer science, whether it's with Scratch or otherwise, and I found that really exciting to learn about how we can help folks be creative with computer science. So.
Can I take the mic and propose that we go off script slightly here? We haven't asked for his blessing in advance, so he's about to find out that Charlie, we have a question for you. Charlie, who's kindly been chiming in on the chat with URLs and whatnot, would you be comfortable joining us down here? All right, so if anything goes wrong online now, it's because Charlie's not paying attention to the live stream anymore, but come on over here. And Charlie, along with Carter and our friends Rongshin and Patrick, who are sitting farther away, so we won't summon them down all this many steps in the stadium, have wonderfully been working on all of these AI-based tools that we've been talking about, bringing the CS50 Duck to life. And so Charlie's one of our teaching assistants from Yale University, where CS50 is also taught in person. And Charlie, and now Carter, we're curious to just hear a little bit about what your experience has been like working on these tools and how you think they'll be received by students at Yale on campus this fall.
Yeah, it's definitely been a great summer working on these tools with the CS50 team, especially because AI is one of those things that everyone's looking at nowadays, and especially in terms of education, how it will reshape this industry. And I think in terms of how students will use this at Yale and at Harvard and beyond, I think it's just a great tool to have a TA essentially be available to you 24/7 whenever you need help in a helpful manner that doesn't necessarily give you the solution all at once, but it gives you the steps needed to figure out the problem on yourself, and that way you learn a lot more throughout that process.
And maybe one other question about your experience actually working with CS50 full-time over the past couple of months over the summer. So Charlie's indeed been working with Patrick, another of CS50's TFs named Andrew, working alongside of Carter and also Rongshin. For those students who are tuning in here and are thinking about like how they can actually learn how to program in the real world and what it's like to have a real programming job, do you want to speak to what it's been like working with Andrew and Patrick and the team, if only to give folks online a precursor of what it's like not just learning on your own, online, but actually working with other humans on AI?
Yeah, sure thing. I mean, specifically with AI, we usually start off the day by trying to figure out what our current status with the project is. So oftentimes with a project such as the Duck Debugger for CS50, we don't have exactly a very defined idea of what this project will be at the end. So we oftentimes need to sit down and brainstorm what our goals are, both for the short term and long term. And then after that, we actually divide up the work into our tasks for the day. And it's a very collaborative process. I actually love being at the CS50 office where I can just turn around and ask Ronshin, Andrew or Patrick for any help with some of the tasks that I might be working on, or to give advice on some of the tasks that they might be working on. It's also great to also just be with the rest of the CS50 staff team here with David and Carter, Bernie, and others, because you can always just pop into their office and get some advice for pedagogical practices, for example, with our duck debugger, in terms of how much advice should the duck give to you if you are solving a problem for a student, for example.
Well, before we wrap up, just wanted to also thank Vlad and Max, who are off camera behind the lens that you are looking onto the Harvard Stadium from. What I think we'll do is perhaps one or so more questions that Carter's got lined up here, and then maybe Carter and Charlie and I will dramatically step out of frame, and then Vlad, maybe we can end with a dramatic shot of the Harvard Stadium just as we began. So Carter, what do you have in store for us?
We have one more question here. Have you considered making an online project fair, similar to ones I've seen on campus?
Really good question. So, fun fact historically, back in 2013, when the first iteration of CS50X ended, we actually had a CS50 Expo, EXPO, like an exhibition of CS50 students' final projects. We haven't done that in quite the same way. Instead, what we've been doing in the year since is encouraging everyone to submit a short YouTube video in which you present or demonstrate the project that you've worked for so many days or so many weeks on, and then we post those on CS50X's landing page at cs50.harvard.edu/x, where you can actually see some of those past projects. So we'll think about maybe other ways to bring the fair to life for online students, but we've used those YouTube videos thus far to at least give everyone a glimpse into what it is you're creating around the world. Any final words from Carter and Charlie?
None from me.
Yeah, none for me either.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our live stream. Stay tuned for the next, in which we'll have 2, maybe even 3 microphones. Thanks again to Vlad and Max and Patrick and Rongshin. And this was CS50.